is a country rich in culture and diversity, but when it comes to religion, it is very closely unified. Burma has over 135 different national races, yet less than 5 practice religions. Of these religions, Buddhism is the dominant religion. About 90% of the Burmese people practice some form of Buddhism. Burma has been known throughout history and still today as one of the major countries following Theravada Buddhism. The earliest written evidence of Theravada Buddhism in Burma was in the Pali, dating from about the 3rd century BCE, and later Theravada Buddhism thrived with the help of King Anurata in the 11th century CE. More recently, Burma has been credited for hosting the 6th Buddhist Council, held in Yangon between 1954 and 1956. In Burma today, every town or village has a monastery. Also, monks and nuns are highly visible throughout the country. In Burma today, there are over 400,000 monks and 75,000 nuns, 6,000 viharas, and countless pagodas. Burma is well known for being the home to the Shwedagon Pagoda in the capital of Yangon. The Shwedagon Pagoda is believed to be almost 2,500 years old. Not only is Buddhism planted in the history of this country, but it is seated in the hearts of the Burmese people. In this video, I'm going to discuss the emergence of Buddhism in Burma, the history it played, and the influence it presently has on the Burmese society. Before any form of Buddhism was introduced to the Burmese people, they led a simple, traditional lifestyle. This lifestyle can still be found in the rural areas of Burma. It is believed that prior to Buddhist influence, the practiced religion was some form of nature worship or animism, which is still found today among the more isolated tribes in the country. Among the people in Burma, there are 4 dominant ethnic groups in the recorded history: the Mon, the Paiyu, the Myanmar, and the Shan. These groups all came from various parts of the surrounding countries, including China, Tibet, India, Bangladesh, Laos, and Thailand. The first identifiable civilization in historic-day Burma was the Mon. They began migrating into Burmese territory around 3000 BCE. The Mon brought with them a distinct language and culture and settled themselves in southern Burma. By the mid-19th century, they were the dominant group in southern Burma. The next group to enter was the Paiyu, who arrived in the 1st century BCE. The Paiyu, like the Mon, brought a distinct culture and language and originated in the Tibet area. War was virtually unknown amongst the Paiyu, and disputes were often solved through duels by champions or building competitions. The Myanmar people began to settle in the plains of Burma towards the middle of the 1st millennium BC. They most likely originated in the Central Asian plains. Lastly, the Shan flooded in from the north and conquered the entire region of Burma and Thailand. The northern region of Burma was quickly dominated by the Shan tribe. Much of the information we have today about the early history of Burma and its ties with Buddhism comes from the Sasanavamsa. The Sasanavamsa is a chronicle written in the Pali by a Buddhist monk for the 5th Buddhist Council held in Mandalay in 1867. This writing contains written records on the oral tradition of Burma. The Sasanavamsa mentions several visits the Buddha made to Burma and also the important event of the arrival of the hair relics in Yangon soon after the Buddha's enlightenment. Buddhism did not thrive immediately after the first visits from the Buddha. It grew off and on over several years. The first trace of Buddhism being introduced into Burma was with the arrival of the hair relics. This story lies in the legend of the Shwedagon Pagoda. This story tells us of the time when 2 merchant brothers from Ukala, Tapusa and Balika, were traveling through the region of Uruvela, and their family god directed them to the Buddha. This was at the time when the Buddha had just come out of 7 weeks of meditation and was sitting under the tree, starving. The 2 merchant brothers offered honey and rice cakes to the Buddha, and the Buddha preached the Dhamma to them. Upon their request, the Buddha offered the brothers 8 sacred hairs from the top of his head, and later they enshrined the hairs in a stupa on top of a hill, which is today the Shwedagon Pagoda in Yangon. It is believed that the hill that the Great Shwedagon Pagoda is on was the site where the three Buddhas preceding the Buddha Gautama in the world cycle themselves deposited the relics. As mentioned, there are several recorded visits of the Buddha himself traveling to the Burma region and dispersing keepsakes or his teachings. These events were not only significant for those reasons, but they also established places of pilgrimage that are still there today. One such event is the story of when Buddha himself visited central Burma. Puna, a merchant from Sunaparanta, grew an immense faith in the Buddha and his teachings and took on the vocation of a bhikkhu, a male monk. He returned to his home and spread the teachings of the Buddha and in turn attained aratship in his country. He invited the Buddha to come join in the celebration in his country, and the Buddha agreed, accompanied by 500 arahats, and spent the night in the monastery that Puna had built for him. On the return journey, the Buddha stopped at the river of Namada because he was invited by the Naga king to preach to the Nagas. Here, he left a footprint next to the river, and another print was left on a rock. These footprints, still visible today, were worshipped by the Burmese people and still remain an important place of pilgrimage in Burma. Many events similar to these are still retold in Burma and can be recognized in the pagodas that were built. After the initial recognition of Buddhism in Burma, Theravada Buddhism in particular began to spread. Theravada Buddhism found a fertile ground in the Paiute tribe because of their highly developed urban culture and because they evolved quite independently of Indian influences. The story of King Anarata in the 11th century illustrates the concretion of Theravada Buddhism in Burma and overall the unifying of the country. Anarata was the king of Pagan, and at the time he practiced Mahayana Buddhism. His spiritual advisor, Shin Arahan, had migrated to Pagan from the kingdom in southern Burma, in which Theravada Buddhism was practiced. He convinced King Anarata that Theravada was a superior form of Buddhism. King Anarata was curious about Theravada and messaged Manhual, the king in the south, to send him the Pali scriptures so he could further learn more. Manhual refused to part with the scriptures, and King Anarata became enraged. Next, King Anarata and his kingdom entered into Manhual's kingdom and conquered it, bringing back 30 copies of the scriptures and many monks back to Pagan. After this event, King Anarata declared Theravada Buddhism to be the official religion and embarked on a journey of religious reform. King Anarata is one of the most influential kings in Burmese history. Anarata was succeeded by several other kings who had significance in Burmese Buddhism, mainly through the building of huge temples and pagodas. One of these kings was King Kyanzitta. Kyanzitta, who had been Anarata's commander-in-chief and had succeeded Anarata's son to the throne, consolidated Theravada Buddhism's predominance in Pagan. He built several important shrines during his reign, such as the Shwedagon Pagoda, the Nanda, Nagayan, and the Mayankaba Kubayaki. Kyanzitta's mission was to consolidate the enterprise that Anarata had created. The large temples were invitations for others to come worship and for the bhikkhus to spread the Buddhist teachings. At the end of the 13th century, Pagan fell when the Mongols invaded from China. Although they didn't successfully conquer Burma, they left the country in a state of prolonged mayhem and confusion. The Samga split into multiple sections, leaving an entire state of disorder. They destroyed the empire and ushered in a period of anarchy. Chaos continued in Burma until King Dhamazeti took the throne in the 15th century. King Dhamazeti is known for putting back together the Samga and purifying Theravada Buddhism once again in Burma. With these reforms, Burma entered a new chapter in the history of Buddhism.